Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today we are doing a wrap up of all of my February and March reads. I think there are 8 in total. I have been moving house in February and March, so my head has been elsewhere, so I might not have read as many books as I originally wanted to, but still I have some amazing reads in here, some mediocre ones too, so sit tight and I will run through them with you now. The first book I read in February, and now this feels like an absolute lifetime ago, but it is Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov, and this is an absolute classic, one that I haven't read yet or hadn't read at the time, and I thought it's just one that I need to read because it's classic, read by so many people, so I thought it was about time I picked it up. And my feelings towards this book were, well, I gave it 3 stars. I found an extremely uncomfortable read. For those who don't know, it is about a young man who has always had these paedophilic thoughts about young girls, and he then enters a relationship with an underage girl. So it's a very uncomfortable read. I definitely wouldn't say it was an enjoyable one. It talks a lot about his obsession with her and his desire to sort of mould this young girl into his ideal woman. But obviously she is a teenager and she is going through so many changes and battling with herself growing up. So it's just a very uncomfortable power dynamic to read about. And because of that, I feel like I was never really in the story because I just found it such an uncomfortable read. So yeah, I gave it 3 stars. I'm sure I'm missing some deeper meanings about it, so I might read up some more about it, but it didn't hit the mark for me, and I think that is because it was so uncomfortable, which is meant to be. And not my favourite book I've got here to talk about, but definitely glad I read it because, like I said, it is a classic. And the next book I read in February was Harlem Shuffle by Colson Whitehead, and I wanted to read this after I read Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead, and I absolutely loved that book. I thought it was heartbreaking, amazing, so well written. This book didn't hit the mark for me in the same way. However, I did still enjoy the story. It's about a man named Ray Carney who has a furniture shop and he lives in New York. And to get by, he dabbles in some lightweight crookery, shall we say. Some jewellery items come into his possession and he will then sell them on, but he asks no questions. However, his cousin is very involved in crime, and his cousin brings him in on this really high stake, high profile hotel robbery. And this then thrusts Ray into this world of crime, basically, and these really serious, scary people that then puts his life in danger and his family's life in danger. So this book did feel quite high stakes, and because of that it was a really interesting read and I was really intrigued to read the story. It was a good solid book, not one of my favourites, 3 stars. Yeah, I definitely would read more from Colson Whitehead, but definitely did prefer Underground Railroad. If you are wanting to read something from Colson Whitehead, I would recommend that book over this one. So the third book that I read in February was 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and I have seen so many amazing reviews about this book, and I was in my local charity shop and found this really cute edition, so I thought I would pick it up and give it a read, and I really enjoyed it. It's about the Buendia family living in the town of Macondo over decades and decades. It shows them being born, growing up, and then ultimately passing away. So I love these sorts of stories. I love focusing on a family for decades and decades, sort of like a saga. I absolutely love those types of books. So I did really enjoy this book. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I loved watching the interactions between family members. There's a lot of incest in this book, may I just mention. There's also a lot of family members that have the same name, which can be very confusing, but it does all make sense when you're reading it. So I really enjoyed this book. I loved to see their interactions, their relationships, their relationship with the town and how they either embrace it or completely reject it. I just thought it was a really good study of this family, and like I said, I love a saga, so really enjoyed this book a lot. Then the final book I read in February was this tiny little one, Star by Yukio Mishima. I think that's how you say their name. And it's literally a tiny little book, and it's about a film star who is adored by his fans. There's no real plot to this story, obviously with it being so short, but it's more of a character study on what it is like to be famous. And to me, it seemed like quite a sad life. He had no time to make any real proper friendships or relationships. His closest relationship is with his assistant. This relationship was very interesting though. It was a romantic relationship, and she really rejected traditional beauty norms, and he was attracted to this, I think, because with his role as a film star, it is so fixated on having this perfect lifestyle, being beautiful. So he was really attracted to his assistant, who did not care about that at all, was quite confident with the fact that she didn't want to succumb to these traditional beauty standards. So I thought it was a really interesting little book. I did really enjoy it. You can read it in like an hour. And I thought it was a really great little insight into what it was like to be a film star. So yeah, really enjoyed this book. I would give it a 4 out of 5 stars. And then that takes us into the month of March. And my first read of the month was When We Were Orphans by Kazuo Ishiguro. I'm slowly but surely making my way through all of his work. So this one sounded really interesting to me. It's about a detective living in London, but as a young boy, he lived in Shanghai. However, when he was a young boy, both of his parents went missing, and this forced him to go and live with his aunt in London. And he mingles in very high class society in London, and he becomes this really respected, really famous detective. But obviously the biggest mystery that he needs to solve is, where have his parents gone? So because of this, he travels back to Shanghai to try and figure out the mystery. And this book, I really enjoyed the first half of it, where it described him growing up in Shanghai, his little friend that he had in Shanghai, the sort of mystery surrounding why his parents went missing and how they went missing, you don't really know. And then the second half of the book felt like a completely different book to me. I don't know, it just felt really jarring, the second half. I felt like the character that we got to know in the first half of the story was making decisions in the second half of the story that just like baffled me. It just seemed really out of character from what I perceived the character to be like, if that makes sense. So I found the second half quite a jarring read and did bring the rating down for me quite a bit. I did find the discovery and the reveal of how his parents went missing very satisfying. That's just why I love a mystery. Like, I just love the reveal. It's just so satisfying. So I did really enjoy it for that. However, yeah, the two halves just felt a bit jarring to me. So I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars, I think. Still glad I read it, and I'm still going to continue to read the rest of Ishiguro's work for sure. Then the second book I read in the month of March was The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck, and like Ishiguro, I am slowly but surely making my way through all of Steinbeck's work. I think these two authors are the authors that I want to really try and read all of their work. Steinbeck's writing I just love, and I feel like he is one of my favourite authors. So I was really excited to pick this up. This is a family from Oklahoma who are living through the Dust Bowl migration in 1930s. So all of their land is completely dried out. They can't grow any crops, they can't make any money. And because of this, they make the journey to California to try and make a living. But obviously, whilst they're doing this, so many thousands and thousands of other families are doing the same. So when they get to California, there is no work for them. Everyone is wanting the very limited number of jobs there are in California. And because of this, the landowners are putting their costs down and down and down because they can afford to. So people are really struggling for money. They're not making the money they thought they were going to make. And they are sort of rejected by the Californians as these others. So I thought it was a really interesting book. I really enjoyed reading it. I loved reading about their family dynamic and how they coped under this immense pressure. I feel like Steinbeck always does that so well, just the depiction of family life and family relationships. And I thought it was a really great success from Steinbeck again. I just love his writing so much, so highly recommend this. I think I would give it a 4.5 stars out of 5. And my next book takes me on to the first book that I've read as part of the Women's Prize for Fiction long list. I'm trying to read the full long list, I think it's 16 books. So the first one I read was Pod by Lolita Paul. I just did a reading vlog on this book, so if you want a more in-depth review, then go over to my last video and watch that. But I actually really enjoyed this book. So when I first started this book, I wasn't too sure. So basically it is about a dolphin called E. So this is from the perspective of E, and it focuses on loads of different sea life, like whales, other dolphins, other sea life. And the author for this book had obviously done so much research around these different animals, which is really, really important and did make the book a lot stronger. However, at the beginning, I did feel like it was a bit like info dumping. It didn't feel like it was part of the story. I didn't feel connected to the story. But as the book progressed, I think having this information in your head really did help you. And in the end, I absolutely loved E. I thought her character development was amazing. She starts off because she suffers from a type of deafness which puts her pod in danger. So because of this, she decides to leave the pod to keep them safe. And she's quite a resentful dolphin at the beginning, quite angry and moody because she resents that she can't have the same hearing skills as the rest of her pod. But throughout the book, she becomes this tough character, which I think she needed, who is capable of forming these loving relationships for other people. So I just loved E's character and I loved watching her at the end. The ending I adored. I was so tense at the end, wanted to know what happened. So yeah, in the end, I really enjoyed this book. I didn't think I would at the beginning, but thought it was a great success. So I would give this book a 4 out of 5 stars. So the last book I read in the month of March was Glory by No Violet Bulawayo. I've just finished this book and I'm still kind of reeling from it, to be honest. It was one of the most heartbreaking books I have ever read in my entire life. Before reading this book, I actually saw a few questionable reviews on this book, so I was a bit apprehensive to start it. But oh my goodness, I thought this book was amazing. Like, so amazing. I feel like everyone needs to read it. I think some people didn't like the fact that it's quite experimental in the layout. Like there's some pages where she just repeats the same word over and over and over and over again. I'll try and find you an example. Like here, can you see like can't breathe, can't breathe, can't breathe, can't breathe. So there's some different experimental things that she does, but I think this book was such a success. It's about a corrupt government in a made-up country, but I do think it's based on the Zimbabwe president, Robert Mugabe, who fell from power in 2017. I do think it's inspired by that, but this book was just heartbreaking. It shows the brutality of the government, a country that is in absolute despair, fighting for their freedom time and time again, but then forced to sort of accept this absolute like heinous government in order to like barely survive. It's just so heartbreaking. I can't even explain it. So as you can tell, I'm still sort of reeling from this book. I haven't completely gathered my thoughts yet, but these are all animals, a bit like Animal Farm. So there's no humans, they're all animals, and the president in this country is a horse and he's just so evil, and it shows his complete abuse of power, and this power gets to his head and he just strips his country of any happiness or fruitfulness that it may have, and this poor country is dealing with that. But it's their perseverance and their perseverance of character, and how when the time comes, they are ready to fight for their freedom and fight for their country. I just thought it was so amazing. I think everyone needs to read it. It was so heartbreaking. I did cry about midway through this book. So just be warned, it is very sad, but I just thought it was so amazing. I think maybe the one downfall I have with this book, I don't think it needed the animals. I think sometimes when I was reading this book, I just forgot that they were animals and I had to keep reminding myself. And I know why she did it, so that it gave it more of like a satirical edge to it, which I did think worked well. But I think when it got so sad and I was so involved in the story, I just forgot they were animals. So that was maybe one downfall I had with it. But overall, I thought it was such a success, and yeah, just such a great book that I think everyone needs to read. So yeah, they are all the books that I read this month and last month. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video.